Hello and welcome back to Felony Miami. I'm your host, Joe Stone. And on today's program, we have two guests. Normally we have three. Everybody take it easy. The reason we have two guests today is because sometimes we are lucky enough to book people that have so much to say, we want to get directly to them. So without any further ado, let me introduce who we have. To my right, we have Alex Vaughn. Alex is a Miami native. And, all right, hold on a second. Alex, I just lost all your data. There you are. All right, we're back. Alex is a Miami native. He's an artist and co-founder of Cushy Gigs Creative, an art collective and design firm located right here in the city of Miami. Vaughn and Cushy Gigs have worked with the Miami Heat, the University of Miami, American Airlines Arena, the Goldman Arts Building, History Miami Museum, and many of the biggest developers from Hollywood to Wynwood. And Cushy Gigs offers graphic designs from large format apparel, printing, and specializes in large-scale urban art. You have definitely seen his works on the walls around this city because there are thousands of your works. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, Joe.
Thank you so much. And also, to my left, Carlos Martinez, Miami-Dade public defender. Carlos is a native of Cuba who arrived in Miami in 1969 on a freedom flight. He was elected public defender in 2008 and re-elected in 2012 and 2016 without opposition. Carlos is the first Cuban-American public defender and the only elected Hispanic public defender in the United States of America. Carlos leads a team of nearly 200 attorneys and manages an office of approximately 400 employees, handling approximately 75,000 cases each year. My God, that is a staggering number. Miami-Dade is the largest and busiest of Florida's 20 judicial circuits. Carlos is also here today to talk about the Redemption Workshop. It's a free workshop that his office is holding May 12th at the FIU campus College of Law. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm gonna jump right in because, and I'm gonna kind of set this up a little differently today. What I'd like to do is I want to go to Alex first, and I want to ask you, what has your experience been with the law? Ever been arrested?
Oh, yeah, I've been arrested a few times, maybe more times than I can count. Growing up in South Miami, as a graffiti artist, most of the time I'm on the wrong side of the law, I would argue.
But now, you're the successful artist. You got kids. You're married.
Police love us now, man.
You don't understand hip hop in its current form.
It's been a turning of the tide here in Miami, and a lot of that has to do with the growth of Wynwood, an interest in street art finally, and now we find ourselves, a lot of times where we used to be watched by police in a negative way. Now we turn around and the police are cheering us on. So we've also grown up. We're adults now. I'm a father. I run a business. I pay my taxes. So, a lot of things have changed, but a lot of it has to do with the creative climate in Miami. Has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. How do you see the criminal justice system from your perspective?
It is a maze. It is confusing. It's very tough to deal with. For our, from my demographic, we're mostly kids growing up, being arrested as juveniles, and then becoming adults, and then experiencing, what happens to adults when you're arrested. And for as many times as I've been arrested, it's still hard for me to understand what's going on exactly.
It's an interesting thing that you just said, and I just want to jump on that with Carlos real quick. What Alex was just saying, as juveniles get arrested, it's one thing. And then it's a different story when you get arrested as an adult and have to navigate those systems. And, this is something that we've talked about here before on the show. And I think, honestly, it's two different full shows, the whole juvenile justice system and the general justice system. But where do you guys from the public defender's office stand on that situation between kids and adults?
Well, we stand on the side of kids because a lot of the challenges that we've had in the past is if you do not give the kids an opportunity to just outgrow the delinquency behavior, if you don't give kids an opportunity to do that, by arresting the kid, then getting them a record, then sometimes even sending them to adult court. That's how you end up getting hardened criminals, and that's how you end up throwing a lot of lives away. So we have focused a lot in Miami-Dade County on trying to stop the cycle and trying to stop the kids from even coming into the court system.
Have you seen an improvement over the years?
Huge improvement. When we first started tackling this, like in a really serious way, was in 1996 and 97. Back then, we had 21,000 kids arrested in Miami every year.
Wow.
Last year, 3,000 kids arrested. Our
Wait,
population.
that is a huge drop.
It's a huge drop, and it's
What
been.
do you attribute that to?
Well, there have been a lot of things that we put in place in Miami. We actually done some right things, and
sure.
some things done right too.
Yes.
And part of it has been that a lot of the kids have been diverted from the court system. So they may get arrested, they're booked, they're taken to the juvenile assessment center, they're fingerprinted, but instead of them going through the door that goes to the court system, they go to the door that go through services.
Right.
So the kid is assessed, the family's assessed. They try to figure out, how is it that this kid got involved in this? And instead of giving the kid a record, they get an opportunity to either do some community service, to do some counseling, family counseling, individual counseling, and then the case gets dropped.
So these are the diversion programs that they talk about.
That's diversion program.
That is a diversion program.
Yeah.
That's great. Did you experience any of those programs when you were getting arrested as a kid? Or
Sure, like I remember going to Jack, the juvenile assessment center, right? Yeah. And coming out of there, with community service kind of situations and stuff like that. Maybe you could argue kind of like a slap on the wrist kind of situations, not really having to, spend multiple nights or days in jail, stuff like that. And then obviously later on, it was with advocate program was like another diversion that they did for, I think that's adult
Misdemeanors,
adult misdemeanor adult stuff. Because remember,
probably for graffiti, right?
Yeah, exactly. The majority of my crimes were criminal mischief and trespassing, which are misdemeanors. And I think the one time I got a felony, it was immediately, dropped down to a misdemeanor in court. So I was never spending much time in jail, and I was always getting into these, diversion, things that were happening to people like myself that were not really, quote unquote, hardened criminals per se.
right, like delinquents, like Carlos was saying. Because we know how boys are. Boys have that rough and ready, teenage.
He was saying 96, 97. Those were some tough years for me, man. I was 16 and 17 years old at that time.
So that's when it was happeing.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, the cops kind of weren't even around like they are now. I hear these stories that I hear these stories today, and I actually experienced this with one of my kids. After 9/11, this whole police state concept came down into the school systems really heavy. You hear nowadays that a kid shaking the pencil at the teacher, and the kid gets brought down to the office. The police come in, and all of a sudden he's involved in a police situation. It's crazy.
It's crazy, and it's not.
I'm talking about a fourth grader.
I completely understand, and frankly, it's not just the cops. It's a lot of these kids, when they go to the mall, they have security guards. Now, Florida law treats a security guard the same as a cop. So if a kid gets into an argument with a security guard, touches that security guard, that's battery on a law enforcement officer. Most kids don't know that.
No.
But most kids, if you talk right now, if you were to go to any high school, including private high schools, because I've done that too, you ask the kids, 15 and 16-year-olds, tell me your experiences with a cop. You'll see a certain number raise their hands.
Right.
You ask them, tell me your experience as a security guard. Almost all the hands go up. So, unfortunately, a lot of times they don't even tell the difference. They just feel it's an adult in a uniform with a firearm going up to them, harassing them. Because a lot of times the kids look at harassment. You go up and you ask the kid, what are you doing here? Why are you guys in a group?
Right.
Well, I have news for you. Kids hang out together.
In groups.
As adults, if you're married, you hang out with your spouse or you hang out with some friends or whatever, but that's not how kids behave. Yeah. That's not normal kid. Normal kid behavior is kids to hang out in a group.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of them have experienced that. The good news is because of a lot of the things that we put in place. That, by the way, when we put together a lot of the diversion stuff, thankfully the state attorney was very good in agreeing to a lot of these things. Because if you don't have the state attorney agreeing to it, you're in trouble.
Now, just bringing up the state attorney, do you, a person who works in this industry on the other side of the state attorney, do you think the system is fair?
That's a really loaded question. It depends who you are. It depends what you're charged with.
Okay. When you say who you are, does that mean somebody with money, somebody that's black, white, what?
Somebody with money.
Somebody with money.
Somebody with money. And here's what happens in the system. Now, I'm proud of the work that we do in my office, but we don't represent everybody that doesn't have money. In Miami-Dade County, you have people get arrested for misdemeanors, for trespassing, for criminal mischief. For a lot of those things, they have no attorney. They're not entitled to the public defender unless the prosecutor says in court, I'm seeking jail time. That is a really unfair system that we currently have.
Okay, hold on.
Yep.
So you're saying,
Yep.
unless jail time is on the table,
They don't give you
you're
an
not
attorney.
entitled to use a public defender.
They don't give you
So you're on your own.
misdemeanor cases.
In misdemeanor cases.
In misdemeanor cases, you are on your own.
Now that I think about it, yeah, a lot of those first times you go to the courthouse, you're going there for the pretrial, for the sounding, stuff like that. You don't have a public defender.
Correct.
And they are essentially, I don't want to use the term strong arming, but they're sort of trying to get you to plead out. They want you just to plead no contest, which is basically admitting to the crime, and get you out of there, get you into whatever it is that they're offering you, be it 30 days in county or 200 community hours, an advocate program, whatever it is they're trying to give you. You're standing up there as an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old or whatever with no one behind your back, so to speak.
Right. And it's listen, there's the people that work in this business of law and criminal justice every day go to school for years just to learn the lexicon of the business, the whole language that's
why I said
used.
confusion when you asked me
yeah,
about
no
it.
doubt,
That's one of the main things about it with me has always been confusion.
And when you said hard to understand, that resonated with me because here's something that a lot of people don't know. One of the things we put in place in my office about 12 years ago was that we were hearing out in the community. We started the redemption program, which is the seal and expunge, helping people to seal and expunge their records.
So
we
that
started
they can
in
get
20
a job
years.
and move forward and get housing
Right.
and all that. Yeah.
We started it 20 years ago only with volunteers, and I was the one that went to the first event. I started it. I thought 20, 30 people were going to show up. 200 showed up.
Wow.
And it was a nightmare because back then we didn't have cell phones. I was communicating with my office through fax on a different floor from where I was sitting with all these folks.
For those of you, a fax is the old version, old-fashioned form of texting.
Yeah, a lot slower though.
So it was incredible. But what happened was, as we were doing these events, we were hearing a lot more from the community, from people that were impacted, about the difficulty that they had getting a job, the difficulty that they had, forget just getting a job, even in applying to universities and colleges, state universities and colleges, they ask you, have you ever been arrested? They don't ask you, have you ever been convicted? They ask you, have you ever been arrested? Which is really problematic because...
Is that even constitutional to be able to ask that question?
Well, no one has challenged it. I can't challenge that because obviously I can only work on cases that we're appointed to and there's a crime involved. But I can tell you that I did make some phone calls when I found out that was happening. One of my friends called me up, 2 doctors, they have a daughter.
Yeah.
One of the doctors calls me up and says, oh my God, I need you to help me. And then she starts explaining the situation, which was the daughter had applied to Florida State University and she had been waitlisted, and she starts telling me, my daughter is second in her class. She starts saying all these things. And I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with what I know?
Yeah.
And she tells me, well, my daughter did something really stupid. For her prom, we had sent her, and she and her friends went to shop at one of the stores to get the dress for the prom. They gave her cash to go shop. What do you think the daughter did? They shoplifted the dress. Several of them, several of the
Put
girls.
the cash in the
We're-
pockets
we're
to pay for the
together.
limo.
And
Hell
they
yeah.
went ahead and they shoplifted.
Yeah.
And what happened with that is the girl got arrested. They called the police. Thankfully, they diverted her case. They diverted it. She did what she needed to do. She obviously never took the dress because they caught her right at the door.
Oh, yeah.
But they got money from them. They did all the stuff. Her case got dismissed.
Right.
On the application to college, when it asked you a question, have you ever been arrested for a felony? She replied, yes. What that did at Florida State University,
Triggered a whole series.
they put her
for
on a
sure.
waiting list,
Yeah.
even though she was number 2 in her class.
Right.
She had a great SAT score, which meant she would have been early admission. She would have been one of the first ones to get in, but she was waitlisted so that they have an honor council process and all sorts of stuff. So she was calling me, how can this be? And of course, what I realized is the application was messed up because the application is online. And when you see the question, the word felony is underlined. If you click on felony, it tells you if it happened as a juvenile, it's not a felony.
Right.
The kid didn't do that.
Right.
So she thought she had to answer truthfully. So if you have a family of 2 doctors with a child and they have that kind of situation, imagine people who don't have money,
Yeah.
who don't know to ask anybody,
Yeah.
who don't know, and they go to court, they hear all this stuff. Frankly, in our courts in Miami-Dade County, we have a pretty bad problem with people that don't have attorneys. Because it's not only that they don't have attorneys, the process is really fast. When the judge talks to you, sometimes some of the judges talk to multiple people at once. So when they're taking a plea, they're not asking just you, how do you plead to this case? Do you understand you're giving up this right? No, they ask a group.
Really?
So, and then they go down the line and said, what's your answer to that question? Yes, yes, yes. So everybody's up there. Sometimes it's 5 or 6. People are nervous about this thing.
And this is people that don't have a public
That
defender
don't have an attorney.
or an
a private
attorney.
attorney.
Right.
Or the public defender.
And don't necessarily understand the legal jargon that's being thrown around in the court.
At all.
Yeah,
Stuff
for
like
sure.
that. There's people that don't speak English. That obviously they bring an interpreter out for them. But I've seen
Still.
I've seen a woman, like a grown woman, thrown in the box. The box being like, get ready. You're going to jail right now. We don't care if your car is out there or if you got kids in daycare or whatever. You're going to jail right now. And she didn't understand. She didn't understand what was happening at that moment. And I felt really bad for her, because
Yeah.
it was like some traffic infraction thing. She probably hadn't paid like tickets in a long time or something. But confusion. It's
Yeah.
confusion.
It is very confusing.
If they're going to lock her up, then we get appointed on the case in that situation. That's
Right.
when we would get appointed.
Like in that moment or
In that moment, and typically what happens if a judge is trying to do that, number one, we walk the judge off the ledge because a lot of times it's not an appropriate process that the judge has. Because if you're going to hold somebody in contempt for not showing up, not paying or whatever, there's a legal
I
process.
saw that happen about a year ago. It was the first time I'd ever seen that happen.
So
It was pretty
when-
crazy to see.
So when those things happen, we are typically notified either by the clerk of the court
Yeah.
or corrections when they arrest the person trying to take him in.
Yeah.
They notify us immediately because they know they're entitled to an attorney then. But so that's the good news. But, that's kind of bad because it's only the arrest that triggers.
Right.
So one of the things that the judges did not know, when we talk about it's hard to understand the system, many of our judges had no idea how many consequences there are of an arrest or a conviction.
What?
They don't because there's so many.
How's that possible?
Well, I will send you to my website on www.pdmiami.com. On the right-hand side, we have a manual for the consequences in Florida. Nobody had done a manual before we did it. We have it in there. It's 92, 94 pages.
Oh, wow.
So it doesn't matter
That's like
whether you're
asking
a
people to
judge,
read the
an
agree
attorney.
button.
There are
yeah.
so many consequences to a simple arrest or even a conviction that you really have to know. So when we have these processes without an attorney, it's crazy. And it's not fair. It's not right.
So how does that get changed? Because it seems to me that the whole purpose of having this system, and from the conversations I've had, the United States has one of the best systems in the world for dealing with criminals or accused criminals, and
Which is really sad that we can say that.
it's super sad, but not in all areas, because like I know that the money bail system is uniquely American, and
Yeah.
I think the Philippines has the bail system. The rest of the world doesn't use a money bail system, but we're the ones that have like the jury trials, jury by peers, and it's done just a panel of judges that if one was in a lousy mood because his wife didn't
Yeah, in France
say
they
goodnight,
have that.
yeah.
They have a panel of judges.
Right.
Yeah.
In a lot of countries, they have the panel. So, how is it that we have this amazing system, but then we let our fellow citizens walk up and walk into this not having a clue, and they're not given any guidance at all? Where's that? Where's the fairness in that? Is what I'm trying to see. And also, where is the ability for the court to help streamline? In the opening, your office deals with 75,000 cases a year. That's a lot of people being arrested,
It is, and that number is down.
and that number's down.
That number is down from just 2008, 2009.
So-
that number's down almost half of what we
What?
were arresting in this county.
That's insane. What's the reason behind that? Sensitivity?
The reason for a lot of the arrests, go back many years. I mean, we could spend probably 10 shows just talking about that. But I can tell you some of the things that did not help, that made the system worse. When the federal government started pumping money into local area policing, this happened during the Clinton years. They spent a lot of money. They wanted to make safe streets. So they put a lot of money. So you have Giuliani in New York. You have all over the place, a lot of these major cities that they decide, you know what, we're going to arrest our way out of whatever problems, whatever social ills we have. So they started arresting people. They came up with this ridiculous idea of broken windows, which meant if there's a
window theory.
broken window theory, if you got a broken window and if you don't fix it, then the community is going to go to hell. Well, they took that to the extreme, which meant stop as many black people as you can, stop as many Hispanics as you can, and that's in the major cities. So a lot of places, there was a lot of money put in by the Department of Justice duplicating these efforts in major cities, and they spread it throughout the whole country. So what you ended up happening is having this explosion of the criminal justice system, and everybody's just looking, oh, LA's doing it, New York is doing it, we should be doing it. So everybody started copying. Why? Because the federal government gave financial incentives for it. So if you want to start this program in your community, you apply to the COPS program, community-oriented policing. You apply to the COPS program. We will give you the funding, and we'll give you technical assistance. Guess where the technical assistance people come from? From a lot of these places that had instituted these really heavy policing techniques. So what ends up happening is you end up getting a lot of people involved in the system, which then institutionalizes the growth and the employment. Corrections, police, public defenders, prosecutors, additional judges. So all of a sudden you have a system feeding on itself, and there's an economic incentive to keep it going.
Right.
So the good news of where we are right now is that we have looked at a lot of these things that have been going on that are actually ineffective. And we've stopped doing some of those. So we've stopped doing in Miami-Dade County a lot of those low-level arrests that result in no improvement of public safety.
Right. They
So
just bog down the system.
They bog down the system.
Yeah.
They saddle people with a criminal record. And unless you're going to go out and open up your own business, you're not going to be able to get employed a lot of times by some corporation, some well-paying job.
Yeah, for sure.
The government, for sure, you're not going to get a job. So, unfortunately, unless you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to get saddled with a lot of fees, fines, costs,
Yeah.
and that just keeps growing and growing. So there are a lot of things.
It just keeps, yeah.
There are a lot of things that we can do to fix it. And in Miami, we've done some of them. Unfortunately, some of these things have to be done in Tallahassee,
That means legislatively.
legislatively.
So is that just by people contacting their legislators and saying, "Hey, I'd like to see a change," and when, or is it at the voting box? Is it a combination of the two?
Unfortunately, the Tallahassee process, the legislative process, has been made very complicated. So while we think, oh, let's flood the phone calls or whatever, there are so many things going on in the background
Yeah.
that even those things sometimes cannot influence. Now, those things are really good when you've got things going to the floor of the House or going to the floor of the Senate, because at that point you've gotten through the process already. And you're kind of at the last stop.
Right, right. And I mean, this is obviously the whole criminal justice thing that's happening in the country is on the minds and voices of a lot of people at the legislative level, because it's on a lot of people's mind at the community level. So what I always ask is, what can I do to help facilitate a change? Well, I started a podcast, but what can you do to,
Well, I mean, that really, this is a powerful thing to do. And
right.
and,
But I'm actually asking both of you, like, Alex, you're out there in the art community. You're coming from a place where there was a lot of, juvenile delinquency, and I'm sure that you still have, a connection to that whole energy. What are you doing and your, group of peers doing to help change things with what's happening out there with the criminal justice stuff?
There's not. I mean, we still feel relatively powerless. Our whole thing is lawyers now. That's our whole thing now is get a lawyer. You know? So we basically have a crew lawyer that is ready for any and all of our misdemeanor cases to come through. And, and he understands what we're doing, and he's sympathetic to our cause. Because, we still have full-grown men and women going out there and painting illegally. Obviously, now we're more centered in the city of Miami, which seems to be like a little more sympathetic to certain situations, even since when we were young. And the joke always was that, city of Miami deals with real criminals, right? Whereas, you find yourself in Kendall or Coral Gables or South Miami, any of these areas, more like suburban areas.
Pinecrest
Pinecrest was bad, man.
Yeah.
Oh, God. They used to wait for me outside of my apartment.
Sure.
Wait for me to drive a block away and pull me over, every night.
Wow.
Yeah, it's because, those communities, they have much less to deal with, I guess, from a criminal aspect. And the city of Miami, they're looking at us as like knuckleheads, Get out of here, what are you guys doing?
Right.
Which is the right attitude.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, come on, you kids, scram.
City of Miami's always seemed like they've been relatively fair with us. It's not to say I haven't been arrested in City of Miami, but the police force has always seemed to like kind of have a better grasp. Even Miami Beach was always rough on us, But City of Miami, they let us go many times, even getting caught red-handed once, because I think that they kind of saw a bigger picture there, and they've got bigger fish to fry, and they're not going to waste a night doing paperwork for some kid that's writing on the back of a wall that's,
in an alley somewhere.
Exactly.
Not even hurting anybody.
Yeah. And and what you're saying about the whole like situation now with later in life, like how do you deal with having this criminal record? Well, I've definitely had the luxury of not only being an entrepreneur and opening my own business, but also being an artist, right? So it's like almost like a rite of passage. I've only been asked one time to present my criminal record, and that's when we were doing a big mural project at the Federal Reserve Building. And first I like kind of winged it. And then I thought about it, and I was like, "No, they're gonna look this up.
They will look it up.
And they're gonna see that I like didn't really fill this out. So let me go online and see." And that's when I realized I was like, "Wow, I've been arrested 12 times. That's amazing. That's just in Miami too." So I wrote it all in there, and I just kept writing in parentheses like, "I'm just a graffiti writer, Like this is not like anything real serious." So they ended up, greenlighting me. And probably because they wrote it off like he's an artist, This is like what he does. Right. He's not. There's no assault and battery charges on there. There's no armed robbery, nothing like that. But people when they're young, and there's people from our own crew that have made mistakes like that and gotten into stuff. Whether they were charged fairly or unfairly is another conversation. But the bottom line is that they were convicted and have gone. We've got a couple guys in prison right now, and I worry about them when they come out not because of work and stuff like that, because these are guys from our crew that are working artists, but more like the institutionalization that's happening now, which was a word that I thought was funny as a kid. I didn't, it's like maybe it comes out even in movies and stuff, like, oh, he's institutionalized, but that's actually a real thing. I've seen it happen to some of my friends where they now have spent more time behind bars than in front of them. And it's the old adage, you're learning how to commit crime from other criminals in there. It's a school for criminals. And I would have laughed at that notion 10 years ago, but now after seeing everything I've seen, I realize that there's definitely some truth to that. So I don't worry about them coming out and being able to find work. I worry about them coming out and wanting to find work. That's my concern now, is that they're going to come out and they're, for lack of a better phrase, they're damaged goods,
And the ability to function.
The ability to function outside, the outside world.
It's a difficult thing to deal with. And a lot of what they're doing when they're inside is you're trying to fight off violent acts against you. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to survive. So it's a totally different mentality when you're in there.
Oh, yeah.
And a seizure, mentality.
It's a different society.
It's a different society. And when you come out, if we don't have the right steps to try to integrate the person back, a lot of times what we find is that somebody will commit a crime just to go back in.
Right.
Which is
to get comfortable.
Incredibly sad.
Yep.
That all of a sudden you have a life that you essentially threw it away the first time you put them in. Mm-hmm. Because they're not going to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, I think that's why these diversion programs are outstanding, because, people sometimes make a mistake. And I guess this country got so scared at one point, I guess in the 90s, that the people in charge went from, okay, let's, the old 3 strikes and you're out, it went from, 1 strike and put them away forever.
Right.
Because, our last program, we had one of your former subordinates on, and every time he would talk about something simple that Alex just said. Oh, it's not like these guys are doing, tagging here and there. It's not like they're doing battery or something. Brad started telling us, oh, well, if you hit this guy through the window of his car, that carries a life sentence. If you smack this guy on the so that carries a life sentence. I was like, geez, how many things carry a life sentence?
So many things in Florida. It's incredible.
What's up with that?
It's incredible. And you know what? The challenge that we have really is trying to figure out in those types of cases, and actually how we arrest people, what we do with people. The difference that we haven't figured out yet is who are the people that we're really afraid of and need to be behind bars, and who are the people that are just annoying the hell out of us because they continue to do stuff that annoy the heck out of us, but doesn't impact public safety.
Right.
They may do some damage to a vehicle or something like that,
right.
But it's the type of thing that just annoys the hell out of you, and that you also pass judgment on because you're like, okay, I'm behaving myself. I'm not breaking into a car. Why the hell is this person breaking into a car? So I want to go throw the book at them. So they stop doing it when in fact, it doesn't prevent any crime. Some of our solutions do not prevent. In fact, they cause more crime and they cause more victimization.
I think they cause more victimization. That's for sure, because, listen.
You're putting people that are already in a hole, you're just digging that hole deeper for them.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's essentially what's happening there.
Yeah, you're making a bad situation worse instead of trying to make it better, because I think we've all heard the conversation that we need to make this more of a reform system and not so much of a punishment system. But I think you just said it. People get fed up and they're like, you know what? Put this person away for good because they're just pissing me off at this point.
Right.
And this is where I think it requires cooler heads to prevail, and where we need to have more of a sense of reality and humanity and community, so that we can, not necessarily judge people so harshly, and give them an opportunity, especially when they're young. And there's so much light being shined on the school to prison pipeline population that's happening now, and how America locks up more people than any other country in the world, and we're I think we're 5% of the population of the world, and we lock up 25% of the world's population.
Correct.
So, here we are creating this situation for ourselves, and then we have to carry that burden. Taxpayers have to carry that burden, which is us. So now we have all these hundreds of thousands of people in jail, and now they're getting older.
Which is extremely costly for the medical care. And not only is it costly for medical care, there's a trajectory. There's been studies done about brain development, about when people commit crimes, what ages they commit crime, when you stop committing crimes. So unfortunately, because we've locked so many people up for so many years, 30, 40, 50, or a lifetime, we get the people, we have a geriatric ward.
Yeah.
In some of these prisons, that if you release these people, they would not be committing any crimes whatsoever.
Right.
But because we put them away, and in Florida, one of the things that happened is, I think it was a really big mistake when we put term limits in for state legislators. Because what happens is when the legislators are elected, they want to be tough on crime, and I'm talking about Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
It's not party affiliation, and I know that because unfortunately or fortunately, I've been around so long that when I first started going to Tallahassee to lobby, the Democrats were in charge, and not much has changed in terms of the severity of the laws that are passed way back when to now. So the big difference right now is now we're looking at things as why is this costing us so much? So I think now we are getting to a consensus that we have not had in the last 20 to 25 years, which is what are we spending our money on as taxpayers? Because all of a sudden you have the Koch brothers looking at criminal justice reform and putting money into criminal justice reform,
Right.
just like the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, and all sorts of groups. So left and right have finally come together for different reasons and looked at the system and said, this system is not working.
Yeah, it's broken.
So we got to fix it.
And one of my big pet peeves is the whole private prison concept. That just blows my mind that even is something that exists. But I don't even want to get into that because that's its own show also. And we
Let
will
me
have that
zero
show.
in on something, really a question for you, Mr. Martinez. Like zeroing in on like very specific crimes now, because up until now we're just talking about crimes in general. We're just talking about
right.
crime and what's happening with it and people going to prison, et cetera, et cetera. But really, one of the big things for us, at least in our consciousness, is drug crime. Right? That's something that I think is I'd like to ask you, do you see your office having to represent less drug cases now? I feel like we're living in a slightly more tolerant time as far as drug stuff goes. And then like we saw just a couple days ago, right, that little Haiti rapist was arrested. Now putting someone, in front of a judge for having a few nickel bags of weed, and then maybe on that same ledger you got this, this serial rapist, this really scary dude. We can clearly draw a line, right, between these. Yeah. But we're seeing, from what I've read, we're seeing a lot of drug people stuck in prison for insurmountable amounts of time. A lot of them repeat offenders, right? Third time's the charm, right? So they're going in for 10 years or whatever.
Or life,
right? Yeah. We've seen it. We've we've all heard about it. Yeah. We've all read about it, and it's scary to think about that. But you're on the front lines. Are you seeing like a change? Like, is the justice system starting to be weighed down less with drug cases, or do you see it just steady?
The answer is yes. We have a lot fewer arrests than we used to have on drug cases. One of the things that we did in Miami-Dade County, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's probably 3 years ago.
Decriminalized like marijuana at a certain.
We did civil citation for marijuana.
Right, that's a
which
big one.
people started calling it decriminalized, which is really funny to watch the politicians
Okay.
react
Yeah.
when people said,
I just said it, yeah.
decriminalization.
A few people
But
cringe.
if you're
right?
not getting arrested and you're just getting a ticket, it's just like a cover charge.
Right.
You know?
But so one of the things that was really phenomenal that we did is about 2 or 3 years ago, the county commission took up this issue. The police department was on board to stop doing so many of these arrests and actually do the civil citation, which is you get the ticket, you get to pay $100 or do community service hours, you're done. They don't put your fingerprints in the system, which is perfect.
This is phenomenal.
Because that's
huge.
what the benefit is. One of the things that happened, which I was really surprised about, because I didn't know it was going to work that well. It was really blind faith, knowing because I knew the director of the police department, and I was supportive of the effort. I ended up being the only politician that spoke at the county commission on behalf of what we were doing with civil citation. I was a little leery because I figured that what had happened in the past was going to happen again, which is if you happen to be white, you're going to get the civil citation. If you happen to be black, you're not.
Going to jail.
Guess what? We started looking at the data. And I have a good relationship with the director of the Miami-Dade Police Department. So I would call him up and say, hey, what are your numbers showing now? So they would give me the numbers and I would look at them. One of the fascinating things was that not only was there civil citation being given, but it also reduced the arrests. Like, I can't remember what the number was, but the percentage of arrests did not equal the adding the arrest and civil citation. So if you had, let's say, I'm going to make up a number. If you had 10,000 arrests before the civil citation ordinance was passed, when you looked at it 2 years down the road, you only had 4,000 of arrest and civil citation combined.
A lot of people are being let go.
So
Right.
the
With
focus,
warning.
Yeah, hey, come on, knock
which
it
I think
off,
is
you
more
kids.
appropriate.
Well, of course.
right? So the focus, and it refocused the whole system into looking at what are the dangerous things that are going on around town, where the shootings happening.
Right.
So they have shifted some of those resources to make sure the burglaries, armed burglaries, and all the really serious crime. So I am seeing a shift locally to that. The other thing that was fascinating, it goes to the first point that I made, that one of the big problems that we had was the federal government pumping money into localities for law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Because the money dried up in 2008, 2009, 2010, and thereafter, because the money dried up, they stopped doing a lot of these stupid sting operations in the black community. So instead of arresting 80, 85 people a week for either cocaine possession or trying to sell a baggie or whatever, those stopped pretty much. I mean,
Because of lack of funding.
because there weren't the cops available because of lack of funding. Mm-hmm. So now when you still have those sting operations, but it's not every week.
It's centered for more serious stuff. They're
Right.
gonna-
Right.
Not
for
just to
for
bust the person that's buying the dime
right.
bag, yeah.
And the more serious things. So I think a lot of it has gone to more targeted policing, more data influence policing, as to see where the hotspots are and where the problems are.
Do you think
with
it's a
violence.
combination of that? And I'm just throwing this out there as a question. Do you think it's also possibly a shift in the hiring of the police officers? Is it maybe that this next generation of officers maybe they're a little more in touch?
More
and
sympathetic,
Maybe, yeah. Or maybe like, come on, the guy's just smoking some weed. Give him a break.
I think it's a combination of things, and I think that probably has a part in it. One of the challenges that police chiefs have down here and everywhere throughout the country is being able to hire people because they have records.
Right.
So
Right.
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So some of the things when we talk about what kinds of things we can do in Tallahassee, some of the things that we need to do is really respect the fact that we have the presumption of innocence.
Yes.
We don't respect the presumption of innocence. And what I mean by that, it's not just that we're posting somebody's photo when they're arrested. What I'm talking about is when the charges are dismissed, sometimes you cannot seal your record. Because if you had a driving license suspended and you were convicted on that, you can never seal anything else. Even though you went to trial, you won your case, or the prosecutor dropped your case because the witnesses were lying, you cannot seal your record.
Wait, if you were arrested for a driving while license suspended
And you get a
and
conviction.
convicted,
Yeah.
you can never seal
Your
anything
anything,
ever again?
anything ever again.
That is a not so fun fact.
That is
That
definitely not
is
so fun.
that is the problem with Florida law. Florida law is very draconian in a lot of places. And again, when I made the comment, that it was kind of a throwaway comment of term limits. What happens is when you have the legislators come in, they try to figure out, okay, how can I do the last one? Or how can I make a name for myself
Right.
in being tough on crime?
Right.
So what they would do is they started passing things, and it was every year. And nobody was keeping track of the cumulative impact of these things. Now we know. But back then it was just
And can that be changed now? I mean,
That can be changed.
So, because one of the
That
things
can
with the
be
term
changed.
limits also, I think, is this whole going to Tallahassee and even learning how the system works has to be very confusing on its own.
it is.
And
Yeah.
and I think it's great that there's a tremendous uptick in the amount of people interested and involved in politics in our country today. I think that's amazing.
That's a big change.
Yeah, and I'm happy to see that more people are awake and what's happening, and I think we need that in our communities. But I also see what a monumental task it looks like to not only get into that game of wanting to legislate or be a part of the community change and progress and public offices. Once you get there, how do you figure out how that whole system works? It's got to take a year or two to just figure out, I got to go meet this guy, talk to this guy, get into this committee. I got to submit it to that committee to get it to the floor, to take it up to the chamber, to put it to the back
I
to the
feel like
hallway.
especially in a city like Miami.
Especially, yeah. I mean, it seems like a huge
It's
network.
it's a monumental task.
Yeah.
I've been going to Tallahassee since 1996, so that's 22 years. And every year, every time we go up there, I'm like, I can't believe how bad it's gotten.
Really?
Because even though after you learn the ropes, and that probably took a year or 2, you learn the ropes because of the changes, who the new elected is, who's in charge of this committee, that committee, who the staffers are. The staffers have more longevity than the elected officials. So when you go in, if you do not know who the staffers are, you don't know what their attitude is toward change, you don't know a lot of things about them, you may be just blowing in the wind.
Because they must
Because
hold
they
a lot
have
of
more
control.
influence. They have more influence on the legislator than you do. They're with the legislator
That's
all
amazing.
the time.
Yeah.
And you're not.
It's
So
interesting.
it is a complex issue. And a lot of times it depends on who the person is and sometimes there's magic that happens. And people look at me like, magic in Tallahassee? Sometimes it's magic because you have the right staffers,
Right.
the right director of the committee, you have the right legislator, chairman of the committee, and you have the right mix of legislators, Republicans and Democrats. And all of a sudden you see things like, for example, 3 years ago, a very Republican head of the Criminal Justice Committee on Appropriations, he had a wonderful bill that, we helped draft, obviously, because we were asked, what do you want to see in this bill? Which actually eliminated all these prohibitions that I'm talking about, sealing and expungement, and would allow for automatic expungement. It was going to be 4.5 million criminal records that were going to get wiped out because of the bill. And this is a very conservative guy.
Yeah.
This guy right now is Trump's ambassador to the OAS, the Organization of American States, Carlos Trujillo. He was the champion of it because he's a former prosecutor. So he knew all the challenges. So most people were like, oh, it can't get past this committee. And I'm like, he's the one that's pushing it. So we were able to get it out of his committee, a very conservative committee. We were able to get it to another hearing. But the problem was that because Florida is so diverse, we had the Florida Sheriff's Association jump in and say, you guys are talking like you're from Miami on getting all these records eliminated,
Yeah.
but not from the perspective that you would think. Their perspective was, We don't have that technology in our little county to be able to pull up the records like you do in Miami. So
the
all
rest
of a
of
sudden,
Florida-
I'm looking at this thing. I'm saying, wait a minute, this is what's going to stop the reform, and it stopped the reform because they did not have the technology available to be able to look things up right there on the scene, and so it ended up stopping it. Now we had a great opportunity. We tried. Now this year we're going at it again.
You are going to go at it.
Of course, we're going to
Because
go
I was
at
going to
it.
ask you,
We're
like,
going to
if-
go at it
like,
again.
if you have a top thing that you'd like to see changed.
That's it. Actually, I have three things.
Okay.
The first
You're
one,
next.
the first one, it's really the seal and expunge process. It should be automatic. If you have not had a conviction, you don't get a conviction on this case.
Right.
You don't get a conviction. You don't plead, no contest or anything. You don't plead. That case should automatically be eliminated.
Yeah.
Forget it. It's done.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you had a prior arrest, a prior conviction. It's done. It's gone. The other aspect of this thing that we need to fix is if you've had a clean record for 10 years or longer, get it off the damn record, particularly the ones that are misdemeanors. There's no reason that if your misdemeanor was 10 years ago, that it still stays on your record. There's no, and you have no additional arrest.
Yeah.
You have no additional conviction. It shouldn't stay on your record. So that to me is
10 years would be like your magic number that you think would be
to me.
appropriate?
I think 10 years. Well, 10 years allows you to grow up. So if you have a 15-year-old and you're 25, chances are you're probably not going to be committing more. If you got arrested as an 18-year-old, chances are that by the time you get to 28, you're not going to be getting other stuff.
What about arrested as a 40-year-old?
Same thing. 10 years.
Okay.
10 years. So to me, it's the same
Right.
thing. 10 years, if you have 10 years of clean.
Ah, right. 10 years of clean.
10
Everything
years of
should get
clean.
wiped off.
Yeah, it should get wiped off.
Interesting.
You should get an
So
opportunity.
that's your
that
wish
to
list.
me is number one, the automatic sealing or
Yeah.
expunging.
Uh-huh.
The second one is the 10-year.
Uh-huh.
Even if you make it 15-year. I had a 74-year-old who was trying to seal his record from a prostitution arrest from 1970. I'm like, this is freaking ridiculous.
It really is the world's oldest
I'm
profession.
like, right? But so that is one big one. The other big one is, unfortunately, in Florida, we're funding a lot of the criminal justice systems through fines, fees, and costs.
right.
People are getting saddled with fines, fees, and costs.
Yeah.
I
And
can
it
attest to
hits the people who can't afford it the worst.
Right.
Because then your case is sent
Always.
to collection. You fail to show up to court to explain why you didn't pay. Then they may issue a bench warrant if you fail to show up because you were at work. You can't afford to take off work. All of a sudden, you get arrested.
Very little leniency in it.
So to me, we should go back to the system that we had when I started practicing law, which was you have to make a finding of the person's ability to pay. And if the person is not able to pay it, it doesn't mean that you get off scot-free. It means that you have to do community service hours or do something
That
else.
seems like an obvious course of action.
It does.
right?
And I can't believe
Not in
that it
Florida.
actually existed. You said it did exist when
It
you
did
were
exist.
first.
It
Huh.
did exist. It existed, and over time, in '96 and '98, they kept passing different laws.
Yeah, a lot
adding
of crazy
different
shit
fees
went
and
down in the
fines.
90s with the criminal justice system.
And they kept
real.
eliminating
Yep.
things.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you apply for the public defender, there's a $50 fee. It used to be that it used to be 40, but when it was 40, they could actually waive the fee. A judge could actually look at it and say, "I know you can't afford it. You're not going to have to pay it."
Yeah.
Not
Perfect.
anymore. A year after they passed it, they're like, "You can't waive that fee. You can't waive some costs." And now it's absurd. Now it's $700 for a little misdemeanor case.
Yeah, no, I've sat in courtrooms around the country and watched the people being paraded in that do not have the $125 to pay, and they just send them right back to jail.
Yeah, a lot of them are homeless.
It's astonishing
lot
to
of
me.
homeless here.
It blows my mind. It's like, wait a minute, this doesn't even seem remotely correct.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's
Cards
so
are stacked so
backwards.
heavily against them. And that's what I was saying earlier about the hole that they're in only becoming bigger.
Right.
There's people that are robbing because they can't, they don't have a job and they can't eat and they have a drug habit,
Yeah. What's the biggest change you'd like to see, Alan?
I mean, that's my segue, right? The drug habit. So The biggest change I'd like to see would be, less jail time for drug offenders and more of like mandatory drug rehabilitation. And I'm not talking about halfway houses, because I think we've probably all read enough horror stories about the stuff going on up in West Palm Beach and stuff like that. It's really disturbing. It's maybe like a privatized system, so it's very profit driven, very easy to manipulate for profit, which is disturbing and disgusting. When you're talking about people that I have personal friends that have disappeared, literally and figuratively, people that have died and people that have they're not who they once were because of drugs. And some of them have been thrown in prison, and prison cleans them up for the most part, but it's like a Band-Aid, because then they're back out in the streets
and they can't deal
and
with
they've
it.
got a felony now for drugs, and they do their best, and most of them fall back into it, depending on what their drug of choice was, right? But here in Miami, heroin, prevalent, very hard to kick, chemical addiction, and I've watched very good, smart, intelligent, artistic people destroy their lives completely from drugs. And I'd love to see a government-funded program that mandates rehabilitation programs. I mean, I don't have like an answer.
But just not throwing people in jail for having
not just throwing
drug
people in
problem.
jail because they have a drug problem.
Right, yeah.
Drugs in general, being a criminal act, has always kind of bothered me from a moral standpoint, because a lot of it is self-inflicted stuff. Now, of course, we know that self-infliction can then, go. It can
affect the community.
It can
for
affect
sure.
the community
It- 'cause
once
it
you've
has
got people
ripples.
breaking
Yeah,
windows
yeah.
and
Right.
to
Robbing
into cars
to
and
feed their
robbing
habits.
people.
Burglarizing homes, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we know that, but what about if we stunted that early? What about with those early juvenile arrests that person who later becomes a assault and battery criminal? Those people, what about if we stunt it early and we do our best to try and get them off drugs from an earlier age, instead of just constantly just throwing them in jail, and then they're out in a couple of days.
Yeah, and I think part of that whole thing is really education and removal of the stigma
Right.
of being an addict, or even mental health
Absolutely.
care issues.
There's definitely a stigma
Mental health
attached.
is huge.
Yeah.
Like I went through it myself, where I was judging some of my friends for being drug addicts, and I was being really tough on them. And then one day I just let it go, and I just said, you know what? These are good people. These are good, close friends of mine, and they're struggling right now.
Yeah.
They're having a really tough time, and they're just not getting the help that they need.
Yeah, I mean, because addiction, it really is more, it's not a criminal thing, it's a public health issue, and I think a lot lot agree on that now.
It's probably a world issue. We know
No,
it's
it
an
is,
American
yeah.
issue, and
Listen,
we definitely know it's a Miami issue.
Listen, if you go to the WHO's website, or you look at their manual under diseases and you look addiction up, addiction falls under the guise of disease. And if you don't think that's true, look at how many private insurance companies pay for addiction treatment, and then tell me it's not a disease, because those motherfuckers wouldn't pay for anything if they could get away with not paying for it.
Right.
Yeah, that's
True.
a fact.
That's a fact.
So, yeah, I mean, addiction definitely, and that could do 2 shows on that, and I agree 100%. I'd love to see the system ease up on nonviolent drug offenders. And we've had shows.
And there's been a lot of that.
There has been,
There
which
has
is
been
great
a-
news to
there's
hear
been a lot
from
of
the
that.
public defender's office.
Yeah,
That-
there's been a lot of that with the drug court, the creation of the drug courts.
and the diversion programs there.
And the diversion programs.
Yeah.
And I was the attorney in drug court back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I can tell you there were a lot of lives impacted positively. But the benefit of doing the drug court is they understand that addiction is a process. And getting off of drugs, it's a process.
Yeah,
sure.
And sometimes you may not be able to get the person off the drugs completely, but you can get them weaned off as much as you can, and so that they're not doing any harm to others.
Right.
So it's a harm reduction approach
Right.
that you're taking. So it's a medical approach that you're taking rather than a criminal justice. Now, I'll leave you with a last issue, which is one of the things that you mentioned earlier. There were a lot of people that were impacted with multiple arrests for drugs over the years. One of the problems that we have in Florida is we have a lot of people still in state prison with long sentences that they ended up getting the long sentence because they had an underlying drug issue. And unfortunately, unless we change our constitution to say we can actually go back and get those people out, you're not going to get a change on that. So that one is even harder. To being able to effectuate that.
Yeah, I've always wondered about like the situations where people commit a crime, like like marijuana. Let's just use as an example. They've been caught with marijuana for the third time or fourth time or 10th time, right? And the book gets thrown at them, and they're doing 20 years now. But now that same charge that they were charged with, that was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back for them, has now been not decriminalized, right? But
civil citation.
But it's become. Let's do the callback to that. So
Exactly.
So why can't we go back in there and say, hey, you know what? Like, this guy's not so bad after all. Like, let's let's free this man, because what he did back then that we like came down so hard on him for is actually no longer a crime. Right. It seems unfair that our society can progress but still say, no, this guy still belongs in prison, though, even though we now realize that it's not so bad what he did.
Well, in California, they tried to take care of that, and they've taken care of that.
Yeah. I know it's definitely more complicated than I'm making it sound.
No, but in California, they did just that.
Yeah.
They decided there are certain crimes, for example, some of those low-level drug crimes, that we're no longer going to consider them crimes, and not only are we going to do that, we are going to get the people out.
Yeah.
But there's a huge backlash to that right now in California. So there's an initiative to actually undo that.
Why?
In a big money.
Yeah.
Money. We go back to money. You've created an industry that
we take
feeds
something away
on
from this
itself,
conversation. Yep.
and all of a sudden, you're taking away the livelihood of being able to, funnel that, then you're going to have an issue.
Yeah.
So
that's the problem. We need to, because that's one of the problems. I was just listening the other day in like Oklahoma. These people arrest so many of their own people because, and they charge people and imprison people because their contracts with the private prisons require them to keep the beds 90% full.
That's a problem.
That's a big problem.
That is something that you got to stop.
We got to stop
that. There's an incentive.
Yeah.
There's an incentive
to arrest
people in
and
there.
convicting people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just too much of the prison should never become a private thing. That's a whole nother show, and we're going to get to that show probably before the end of the first season of Felony Miami. All right, listen, you guys are amazing. Before we wrap it up, we'd like to ask a music question here because this is one of the things we do. So what I want to know is who's playing on your playlist right now this week?
Oh, I got Helene Smith on there. I got Timmy Thomas.
All right.
I
Some
keep
Miami,
it.
some
I keep
Miami old school.
Yeah, I keep it Miami old school. I keep the Miami
Henry
soul.
Stone music stuff there.
Always, man.
I
I keep the Miami soul in heavy rotation at work right now.
Nice.
Yeah, some Alvin Robinson, some stuff from outside of Miami too.
Nice.
But Sam and Dave.
Nice.
all the Miami classics.
Good
I'm a Miami
soul.
boy, and I love to. I represent to the fullest.
No doubt. Love that. Who you got on the playlist?
Well, this is really bad. I don't have a playlist.
What? Oh, get out of
I
here!
do not have a playlist, but I can tell you.
Okay, what radio
You're
station?
Cuban too,
email.
man. You should have the.
I listen to NPR.
Oh, man.
I'm a log geek.
I'm guilty of
okay?
that also.
So
We're doing talk radio right now, right?
But one of the best emails that I got yesterday is next week I'm going to see U2 in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
So I
Nice.
got the email
Those guys
with
do
the
a good
link to
show.
download their album. So
Okay. So you're going to find out who
I
this
am
group
gonna do
U2
this.
is?
I thought U2's album just appeared on everyone's phone automatically, right? Wasn't that a thing?
That was a thing, actually.
so that's what I'm going to be listening to this weekend.
This week, some U2.
Yeah.
All right, right on. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for being here and participating in this conversation. Check us out, felonymiami.com. You can get us on Spotify, iTunes. Tell your friends, write reviews. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. For the entire Felony Miami crew, I'm your host, Joe Stone. We'll see you next time.
Well, it's early in the morning, then when I ride, Lordy Mama. Well, it's early in the morning, then when I ride. Well, it's early in the morning, baby, when I ride, baby, you have a line, baby, on my right side. Well,